venerable monks and nuns, sisters and brothers, very good morning to you all. It feels good that we gathered here to conclude the 5-day course. Then of course it gives a feeling of little sad. We will part in a different way. Of course, whenever we meet, it is for parting, and for parting is perhaps for meeting somewhere else some other time. But the interaction, a talk, or exchange of information we have had last 5 days are of 2,500 years of a continuity of a teaching and a continuity of views and concepts evolved and developed by many enormous scholars and practitioners, which are available until to us due to the unbroken tradition and the care taken by various lineage holders in order to preserve, protect, and promote the teaching of Dharma coming from Buddha Shakyamuni. If we look to generality of the world, we are living in a so-called postmodern civilization, and a number of traditions are being either considered to be irrelevant, or they meet just a natural death and no more exist. But Buddha's teaching, particularly the Buddha's teaching preserved in Tibetan language, has more audience than ever during the last 55 years. This is something unique. And I think this shows that there is some relevance and there's some demand, a natural kind of demand from the people. People not those kind of people who are illiterate or backward or uneducated, but people belonging to those nations or those places where much advanced development have been taking place, and many people who took interest in Buddha's teaching are to those people, to those class of people who are intelligent and who are having an open mind. So that tells us that still it is relevant to humanity, so we should talk about it. We should try to understand it, and we should share to as widely among the people as possible. So therefore, I consider that we did not waste the past 6 days. On the contrary, with our good intention, and we jointly made some positive effort to share some ancient knowledge. I do not claim that each one of these details are still important, relevant, but as in a totality, as a whole, it is still important and relevant. So we have deliberated on such issue. So yesterday, mostly we spend the time to discuss the very pertinent and appropriately formed questions, well articulate questions, and those questions make a very good contribution to clarify number of things. And thereafter, we did discuss earlier to that the historical events of the development of Madhyamika philosophy propounded by Acharya Nagarjuna in India. I still insist, in spite of many arguments put by historians, I still insist he appeared in 400 years after Buddha's parinirvana. So my insistence is not just a stubborn insistence, but I have a certain logic and a reasoning behind that. There's no occasion to elaborate on them. The book written by the present Vice Chancellor of Central University of Tibetan Studies, Sarnath, Professor Gishin Santen, his first PhD thesis work was restoration of Ratnavali of Nagarjuna. Ratnavali is not available in Sanskrit in totality. Only fragmentations are available. And Professor Samdhong spent more than 5-6 years to reconstruct the entire Ratnavali into Sanskrit language and translate it into Hindi and make an extensive introduction to it. In that introduction, he discussed the date of Nagarjuna quite at length, and those arguments and historical evidences, particularly the historical evidences of the Shalwan dynasty of the Birdab region. So therefore we can say, without much hesitation, that Nagarjuna appeared after 400 years of Buddha. It's not important, but sometimes we have to argue with the historians and the scientists when they interpret everything in accordance with their own very narrow framework. And they need to widen their framework sometimes. It doesn't go against the rationality and against the reasoning. So since then, the Madhyamik philosophy flourished and divided into two mainstreams, and again each, the Swatantik Madhyamika divided into many sub-streams and sub-groups, and we have the original writings of these groups and the scholars. So fortunately, most of them are available in Tibetan version, so we still has access to that. So since here you have Sheda, and I think the Sheda should take 3 texts for their study in the long run: Madhyamik Mool Karka and the Chaturashatak and the Madhyamik Avatar of Chandrakirti. So these 3 makes a complete presentation of the entire Madhyamik philosophy. Then also we discussed briefly the Tibetan side, within the Tibetan territory, how the Madhyamik philosophy arrived and how it was developed, and from which Indian sources they arrived there, and how many commentaries and other important treatises have been translated into Tibetan language. It might seem not very important, but I took time to explain this because the authenticity and the tradition need to be looked into and understood. A view and a concept which propounded by certain authentic scholar, we need to take them seriously and not in a hurry to interpret them in otherwise. We should patient and take time to dwell within it and try to understand. The Buddhist literature, the Buddha's own words, and the Shastras, the commentaries, are not very easy to comprehend. It needs a lot of hearing, reading, and a lot of contemplation, and a lot of meditation. So that's why the Buddhist system of education always goes combination of these 3. The accumulation of wisdom from the hearing to Yungishrup, and that wisdom come out of contemplation, some Yungishrup. Actually, Vasubandhu says, this true wisdom coming out of hearing the Tujung Shrub, it says it is not your knowledge, it is borrowed knowledge. And you convert it into a Samdhong Shrub, then it becomes half of your own. Then you experience it in the Gunjung Shrub, then you can consider this is your own knowledge. And otherwise it is borrowed from the canon or borrowed from the teacher. So we need our own insight. So that is only the wisdom which is come out of meditation. So need to be long time and need to be lot of effort, reading, over-reading again and again, and consulting with the commentaries. And then after some time, you will begin to understand the very subtle and very delicate portions of the connotation of these words. So therefore, we need a lot of patience and a lot of endurance and effort to understand those things. It is not just a information package or advertisement. Only a catching words give you the complete information. So there are many texts which can be interpreted in 6 different ways or 4 different ways. All of them are not just later addition, all of them are the intention of the Buddha. So these things we have to keep in mind. So having said that, we did discuss about the concept of Prasangik Madhyamika regarding their 2 truth conception, and then the 2 selflessness of phenomenon and the selflessness of the person. So how they consider everything is just simply imputation of thought and words, and there's nothing exists from its own characteristic, from its own side, or from its own nature. And once the existence of the truly established solid existence, you negate that, and at the same time you negate all the other things, and there's nothing is left remaining. Like these Swatantik Madhyamikas, you just negate the existence of the truly established, and the rest you are left without negation. You do not see the reality, the truth, how the things in fact exists. So therefore, you shall have to negate all these things. And in order to negate the illusion, the grasp on self, which does not exist, you have to recognize exactly what is the point the grasping of self does hang on, and what the appearance and what the substance and what the point, and without saying that, it is difficult to negate. When you conceive the self, you conceive a self which is independent of everything. Nor there is base, nor there is imputation, nor there is designation, but there is existence which comes immediately to your diluted mind. And similarly, you conceive a phenomenon, and you conceive phenomenon really solid independent existence. But to observe this is the most difficult job, because when you try to observe it, it shies away, and you will not able to catch how it grasping to that object. So perhaps for this, not only academic deliberation is enough. You need a certain practice and contemplation. So here we are just an academic deliberation. I will not indulge into this, but I will say there is a point. If you catch it, then the understanding of Madhyamik position become very easy. Then you can use the logics advanced by Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and everyone so very easily, and then those logics are so strong and so powerful. Unless and until you recognize that point which is indeed to be negated, then whatever logic and reasoning you might use, that become just a mental entertainment, not cutting on the basic thing. You can elaborate it in many ways, but it doesn't hit to the target. So therefore, you have to spend considerable time and make considerable effort with patience to recognize that one. So that's why recognizing the lower school's position might help gradually to recognizing the prasangic position of the self-conception to negate that. So today I briefly discuss, not in detail or not in depth, but just for information's sake, how the Madhyamik school, now I am remaining only in the Prasangic Madhyamik school. I will not go back to Swartantik, because we discussed Swartantik quite well, so I will not go there. So today we'll always remain whatever I talk, it will remain within the framework of the Prasangic Madhyamik schools. That means the position of Nagarjuna as understood and commented by Buddhapalit and Chandrakirti. And that Chandrakirti tradition is very much adopted by the entire different traditions in Tibet, and also in India. In the later stage, the majority of the scholars belonging to that tradition. One important syllogism or logic used by Nagarjuna in the first chapter of the Madhyamik Karika, that calls the negation of four ends arising, Mushichingo Kripa. Because all the lower schools are afraid of getting into nihilism. Therefore, they always conscious that the continuity of life, the karma and result of karma, and all the things in the world should not be negated its existence, and we should only negate something which is called imposition of self. So mostly the care was taken for the process of arising. If there's no existence from its own characteristic or from its own side, how the causes can give the effect, how the cause and the condition can help to arise the right kind of the result. Hitu Prate and the phal, the cause and the effect. There need to be a transition in the reality. And unless there is a transition in the reality, then arising cannot be established. So this is the usual feeling of the many people. So a lot of debate goes on how the seed gives birth to the sprout. And so this is a discussion the Nagarjuna starts in his Madhyamik Karika. Dale mai, shenle mi, nile mai, jume mi, ngobokanda kanaya, chiwanami yumai. The things arising does not arise from a cause which is seen with the result. Similarly, all the arising things does not arise from a cause which is by its own nature different from the result. All the things does not arise from a cause, both it is same with the result and it's different from the result. And the things also does not arise without any cause. So these four possibilities of arising from a similar cause, from a different cause, from a similar, different, both, and from without cause. So how he argued this? He argued, if the cause and the result does exist by its own nature, then you shall have to find either of these four possibilities. The Prasangika Madhyamikas need not find the arising any of these four possibilities, because they do not accept anything which is exists by its own nature. So it's a little difficult to comprehend, but we shall have to go slowly with this. If the cause and the result are of the same in its own nature, then there is no question of arising. The cause has already formed into the nature of the result. And again, if comes out of that, then that is a repetitive arising. If there is a repetitive arising, then there will be no end to a arising, or no beginning of it arising. Then there cannot be a stage of disintegration. It will remain all the time arising, arising. So therefore, the same cause cannot give arising to a same result. The seed and its sprout are not same from its own nature. Otherwise, the seed shall have to be a nature of sprout, and therefore there is no possibility of rising into the sprout, because it is already in the nature of sprout. And if these are different in from its own characteristic, actually, I cannot translate these things in English, otherwise the Chandrakirti's words are so beautiful. Tinyi dilenjona yuendenga yumai chivar jubal haryan chivar yubumaino. Chisin haryan chivar yung stobar churnani nyugula sunam chivan dinyi minjurshi. Sabin sidar tubarat chivani tunjur. If the things arise repeatedly, then there will be no chance for the sprout to arise. Only the seed will repeat arising over and over again, and there will be no end. If these are arising from entirely different cause, then the second portion, then he says there will be no arrangement or no concept of relation between cause and effect. Anything can give arising to anything. If something can give a rise to anything, then the flame of a light can create a complete darkness, and something like that. So the cause and the effect can never be different from its own side, from its own nature, from its own characteristic. Then, if you say it arises from the same and from different nature of cause, both, then I need not to argue with you again, because both of them I argued it is not feasible. Then you may say the things arise without any cause, then there will be no order in the phenomenon. everything might create, everything might give rise to everything. And there is no order, there is no sequence, there is no similarity between the cause and effect. So this is the first syllogism which Nagarjuna has propounded in his Madhvika, and which is very largely used by other commentators. As a matter of fact, in the Madhvika Mulkarika, there are more than 1,000 different kind of arguments, so nobody can go into the detail. In each chapter, he argues on different thing, on different nature. He had discussed about how we constitute the coming and the going, how we constitute the seed and the sprout, and how we constitute the samsara and nirvana. All this he discussed he debated how to conceive them, how to perceive them. So this is one of the beginning. So it's good to understood how negate the concept of existence from its own nature, from its own side, from its characteristic, or inherently exist. Then in that case, you shall have to find the arising either of these possibilities. Since Madhyamika, Prasangika Madhyamika do not accept anything of this existence by its own nature, then the arising, the cause, the effect, all of them are being just designated by thought and by name, by word and by mind. So this designation alone is sufficient to understand the operation of the entire phenomenon and entire mind. So this is one of the syllogism used by Nagarjuna, and I just as a simple mention it to you. Then there is another syllogism which is used for basically to prove the selflessness of the self. Selflessness of self is proved with a metaphor of a chariot, and then this is a 7-end discussion. The chariot, how the chariot exists. So there's this possibility of 7 different ends. The chariot exists there independently, different from all its parts. The chariot has so many parts. When we conceive a chariot, there's no clarity. It's a part, or it's a partial, or it's a whole, or it's a... Just we conceive a chariot in a wholesome. So when it is exists by its own nature, you shall have to find it out. So the chariot is independent of all the parts. Then you shall have to be able to find, after putting away each of the parts. If you dismantle all the parts and putting away all of them, and then you are asked to, where is the chariot? If this is different, then definitely it should remain, because it's not the parts, it's a different. And then if you say, no, this is the not separate from the parts, it is the same with the parts, then the parts are many and chariots are one. If it is sin with the parts, then you cannot conceive one chariot. If there are 50 different parts of chariot, you shall have to conceive 50 different chariots, because it is sin with the parts. Then the third possibility is, no, chariot is not the same of the part, not different from the part, but the chariot has the parts. Chariot is a kind of honor which owns, which do have all the different parts. Then again, the similar. What is this? If this is on to that chariot, then you have to pinpoint after separating all the parts. You shall have to show us, tell us, this is a chariot and all these parts are of this. This is the whole and this is the part, how you will exhibit it, how you perceive it. And the fourth possibility is, no, the chariot is, the parts has the charity. It's not the same, not the different, but parts are a kind of base and on which the charity exists. And in that also, the first argument doesn't answer. You have to search, and each part has a complete chariot, or all the part together has a complete chariot. So, without define this situation, you can't say the parts has a charity. Then the fifth possibility, or this the first is one, the second is separate, and the third is having the parts by the chariot, and the fourth is the parts having the charity, and then the fifth is all the parts are dependent of a chariot, the vehicle, or the vehicle is dependent of the parts. In that matter also, how make the dependency? Unless a vehicle is identified, you cannot say the parts are dependent of this. And unless the vehicle is dependent of the parts, and which vehicle would become the dependence of the part. Then sixth possibility is the combination of parts. If the combination of parts are chariot, a vehicle, then can it be a vehicle? You put all the parts together in a bag without piecing them in its own place, because the complete part is there in one side. If the combination of parts are become a vehicle, then you shall have to accept 4 wheels and all the other things put together in a box that makes a vehicle. Then the 7th possibility is, no, when it's fixed in a particular shape, the wheels should be put its own place, and the other things has its own place and fixed in a orderly where the part is needed, and it will make a particular shape or form, and that would be the vehicle. Then in that case also, the shape does not have a identity. These are all composite of the different shapes, the shape of the wheel and the shape of the other things, the roads and all these things, and which shape is to be considered as a vehicle. And if you have a different shape and that need to be identifiable, and where it lies, in front, back, up, down, so you have to find. So therefore, in the search of 7 different portions or 7 different ends or possibilities, you will not find a solid vehicle. So this metaphor is basically for analyzing the self of a person. A self of a person is like a vehicle. It is imposed on the 5 aggregates of the person. And you can analyze each one of the aggregates and the person as the same or as a different, or person is a position of the 5, or the 5 position of the person, or just combination of the 5 is the person, or the 5 combination, the combination 5 forms a different shape and that is the person, or where is the person? By this way, the analytical search of the person that negates the existence of self by its own nature, by its own characteristic, by its own side. So it can be negated by that way. This is one of the famous arguments. And of course, just now our conversation, it may not make any clarity to you, but when you read the texts, and particularly dealing to these texts, Madhmik Avatar or his commentaries will give you more insight when it goes in detail. Again, as I said before, unless and until you recognize the object to be negated, the target of negation, all these arguments may not be effective and may not work to your mind. Then finally, I will mention about one syllogism, one reason to establish the no-existence of anything from its own side or own characteristic or own nature. That is interdependent origination. Interdependent origination is the Sanskrit original word is Partitya Sam Utpad. Baba Vivek and Chandrakriti, from the viewpoint of the Sanskrit Vyakaran, Sanskrit grammar, they try to dismantle this word and then reconstruct this word and find a connotation. Both of them has a lot of argument, so it can only understand by the Sanskrit grammarians, nobody else. I don't know how they are arguing about this. But this word, Partitya Sam Utpad, has three portions. Partya, Tia, Sam Utpad. So this gives meaning or connotation to three different ways, and it is translated into Tibetan language, Ten Dil, in 2 words. That's very good. Not only ten is dependence, and Dil is related. Dependent, related, 2 words combined, Ten Dil. In English language, there are so many different translations. Now, by and large, people use the word interdependent origination. And in the past, some scholars use interdependent arising. And some other scholars use interrelatedness. Interdependentness, arising is not used. So whatever it may be, Sam Utpad, if we make the complete word, then interdependent origination or interdependently arising, then I think the Sam Utpad word is completely conveyed by this way. So we use interdependent origination. Interdependent origination, the Partitya has one connotation of meeting of 2 objects. Meeting largely means to have togetherness. It's not necessarily mixed up or combined, but 2 separate things come to togetherness. That means the Tibetan word Treba. And the other connotation is dependency. Dependency means in relation to that. The big is in relation to small. The small is in relation to something bigger than itself. So this is a kind of dependency, not only coming together, but there's a dependency. This has been conceived in relation to something else. And then the third is temba. That means on the basis of, then something designated, something input by thought and by name. So that's how the Pratitsan Utpan is connoted, or it means. So this is the basic principle of Buddha's the whole teaching. Basic principle of the whole teaching of Buddha. And this principle in generally accepted by all the three four schools, but their interpretation of the thing differs. So that's why Nagarjuna make a salutation to Buddha in his Madhmik Mulkarika, the 8 different ways of the understanding of Pratitsan interdependent origination. You have propounded this, and therefore you are the unparalleled speaker, unparalleled teacher. So I salute to you. Kangi tinchin tebarjung, gapa meba, chi meba, cheba meba, ta meba, wa meba, dru meba, tade tumin tunjimi, tuba nishi shitemba, zobe sanje manam chitambadana chasar. You are the greatest speaker because you spoke the interdependent origination. That interdependent origination negates the cessation, negates the arising, negates the this interdependent origination negates the nihilism and also negates the substantialism or existentialism, or it is some people differently interpreted that fine art and infinite both are negated. It doesn't come, it doesn't go. Coming and going also negated. It also negates the separate existence and one existence. And it negates entire, I don't know what should call, punch, trupa. I may call it networking. Trupa nishishideva. What will be trupa? Complexity is better, yeah. It negates the complexity. Actually, in the Dharmakirti's work also, Trupa nishishideva. No, Tope Trawa namsej. Trawa and Trupa is quite similar word, and which may refer to the internet. Tope Trawa namsej, all net is being breakdown. So that is the interdependent origination, and interdependent origination is the most powerful logic to repudiate, to negate the existence of a truly established, or from its own side or from its own characteristic, because all things are arising due to many causes and conditions. So thereby nothing can exist without depending on something else, without depending on many different things, and without meeting or without taking base, nothing can be neither perceived, nor conceived, nor exist. So by this way, they tries to establish the wideness of self on person, and similarly the wideness of self on phenomenon. So that's why, after understanding the Madhyamik philosophy from the commentary of Buddha Palit, Tsongkhapa wrote a very famous praise to a Buddha that we call Tindil Tupa, that means the praise from the dependent origination. Kanki Kanshi Sishin Sumbai, Chinda Tumbalaname, Jawatin Jibanjun Sishin Tumbatilandu. He says, by a singular teaching, by a particular teaching, you become the best teacher, and you become the best knower. Chintan Timbalaname. By knowing the Paticcasamuppan, by knowing the interdependent origination, you become the master of the knower. And by preaching this interdependent origination, you become the best teacher. So therefore, I salute to you. So it's very important, and Buddha's first teaching in the Sarnath, he did not directly used the terminology of Paticcasamuppan, but he gave the meaning in the causality of the causality system of the Four Noble Truth. So this point is very important. Now you have a new way of interpreting the concept of Paticcasamuppan, the interdependent origination. One of my late friend, Lerabling Rinpoche, has originated, and now it become a very elaborate teaching, and it has a new name, that is unity in duality. UD teaching, unity in duality. Lerabling Rinpoche was 4 years older in age, and also 4 years senior in the Depot Monastery class. We were together for about 8 years in Depot Monastery, and he was a great scholar. Then we came to India as a refugee. We separated, and he came to Europe and settled in Denmark for a long time. And then after a number of years, I was able to see him again. And he contemplated on Tyndall, on the interdependent origination. And then, of course, he was very much accustomed to the Western cultural, Western language, and Western people's way of thinking. So he newly developed a new way of communication, keeping the interdependent origination as a center of his thoughts, and on that basis he built up the teaching of UD, unity in duality, and which has extensive literature. And one of the experts accompanying with Lerabling Rinpoche is sitting here. She also gives the course in India and in elsewhere. So someone really interested in a deeper understanding, not only the traditional Tibetan viewpoint, from a look at Tyndall from a different angle, and with all modern diagrams and PowerPoints and so on and so forth, with all modern tools, you should look to that, or sometimes you may attend to that course. That will give you a new insight about the interdependent origination. So interdependent origination can be used for eradicating, as a logic for eradicating the existence of by its own nature, by its own side, or by its own characteristic. And after negating that, then how the entire causality operates, functions, that is more important to explain. Not only the negation of the solid existence is singularly important, but at the same time you shall have to able to explain or establish the entire system of causality, in which a specific order, as I mentioned before, negating things from its own characteristic is tend to also negate the entirety of the causality principles and the order. So to establish that order, you need to understand in depth the principle of interdependent origination. So that is one of the very important teachings of Buddha. Shariputra and Mongolian, both of them very, very important Orthodox Brahmins, and extraordinarily intelligent. Then they are looking for some more knowledge, and one day Shariputra meet the Ashwajit, a newly evolved person, a new monk with Buddha. And then he asked Ashwajit, what is teaching of your master? And he said, Ye dharma hitu prabhava hitin shantathagat. My teacher says the entire phenomenon is come out of causes. And there is an order of causality, and the causality has an order. So this is my teacher's message. And immediately Shariputra understood the reality, and he became the enlightened one. So we should try to study the principle of causality and wideness of the self-existence, and wideness self on phenomenon, and wideness of self on person. If you understand these two, then you are in the process of path. Then you will not. You can think of liberation, and you can think of achieving the nirvana or Buddhahood. So all these things we have talking from the principle of the truth of cause of suffering, and the truth of path to lead to the freedom. And well, we are talking about the truth of cause of suffering. We discussed all this suffering comes out of mental development and the karmic force. And mental development and karmic force is come out of ignorance, the avidya. And ignorance is the thing which grasps on self, which do not exist. So this was the point from where we started the principles of 4 different schools. So we end to the Prasangik Madhyamik school. The Prasangik Madhyamik school recognizes the grasping on existence of anything from its own side or on nature or on characteristic. That is the illusion, and that is the first link of the dwelling person sampan. And you wish to reverse that process of suffering, you have to eradicate this ignorance, and eradication of this ignorance is possible by understanding of the selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomenon, negating all by its own existence. When you negate its own existence, you will understand, one, the principle of interdependent origination, and the other, the baselessness of the ignorance. The ignorance is not based on fact, it is based on force. So therefore you will understand more convincingly that ignorance is eradicable. And ignorance is eradicated with its seeds and sources by meditating on shunyata, the selflessness. And from here you will have gained the faith or the certainty that the nirvana is achievable. All defaultments can be eradicated by meditating on shunyata. So this is for intelligent people how to begin to enter into the dharma. So then if you understand that your ignorance is eradicable, and you can reverse the dwelling, and you can achieve freedom from the cycle of death, birth and rebirth, then you have to take the path. That is the third noble truth, And third noble truth is talking about the truth of path. And that we can very briefly talk about how you enter into the path. The entrance of Buddha Dharma or entrance of Buddhist path is the taking refuge. Taking refuge means, taking refuge does not mean taking someone else as a refugee. The Buddha is not the real refugee. The Sangha is also not the real refugee. Only the Dharma is the real refugee. So Buddha is like a doctor who gives you diagnosis and who describes the medicine. And Sangha is the like nurse who helps you for timely taking medicine and taking care of your welfare. And the real thing which eradicates the disease is the medicine. Unless you take the medicine regularly, the doctor or the nurse cannot cure your disease. The Buddha and the Sangha cannot take you out of the cycle of the misery. You have to practice the Dharma. So therefore the intention is taking refuge into Dharma. That means you have to know the Dharma is achievable by my own effort, and if I achieve the Dharma, there's only two kinds of Dharma. The Agama, that means the literature, the canon or the scripture, and Adhigam, that means cultivation of the teaching in my own mind. Cultivation of teaching in one's own mind is the real Dharma. And that real Dharma can be categorized into three teachings: the teaching of moral code, the Shila, and the teaching of a concentrated mind, the Samadhi, and the teaching of the insight or the wisdom, the Prajna. And this threefold teaching is the teaching includes the entire the reality or the truth of path, the Marg Satya. So in order to proceed, or in order to practice into the Marg Satya, the truth of path, as I mentioned, first you have to take refuge. That is the first step. And the second is you have to cultivate the sense of renunciation. Nisarana, Ninjung, renunciation, renunciation is okay. The sense of renunciation. Renunciation can only come if you realize the cycle between birth and death, or dependence, entirely dependent, lack of freedom from the karma and klesha, and a will to get out of this are considered to be misery, and a will to go out of this, that is called ninjung, the renunciation of the worldly pleasure, and that is necessary. And then thereafter you have to cultivate the Buddha Chit in order to get in the Mahayana path, or you are inspired for just freedom or salvation, then you can practice for achieving arahanthood as well. But most of the people, most of the intelligent people, they inspire for Buddha nature, for the sake of the serving the others, as we discussed yesterday. Then to generate the bodhicitta, there are two great traditions. One tradition is from Shantideva, and the other traditions is from Asanga and those people, meditating on 7 stage of cause and effect, or meditating on one and self and the other equality and exchange. So by these two different methods you can cultivate the bodhicitta, and after having the bodhicitta, then you shall have to practice the entire process of path, which I have briefly mentioned yesterday. When you achieve the bodhicitta, you entered into the path of accumulation in the bodhisattva path, and then you have to meditate on shunyata, and you also have to accumulate the merits, and then you have the meditative experiential wisdom of the shunyata. You enter into the second stage of path, that is path of preparation, and again you have to accumulate merit. You have to practice the 6 paramitas. The 6 paramitas are the paramita of generosity, and paramita of shield, the moral conducts, and the paramita of tolerance, and the paramita of endurance, and paramita of meditation, and paramita of wisdom. All these, the different ways, so many different teachings, you shall have to practice all this. And all these are can be included into the threefold education, the shield, the samadhi, or the prajna. It is a Buddhist way of expressing this as the higher education in morality, and higher education, that means adi, dilhape sutin jilhapa, habe things jilhapa. It may be higher, or it may be special, something like that. Then, of course, as a quality, or as a summary of the entire path, the path includes the ordinary stage of path, and the path at the stage of elevation, the Arya path, the Darshana marg, the path of sin, and the Bhavana marg, the path of meditation. These are the path in the beyond ordinary, beyond the worldly thing, mundane thing. They are in Arya marg, they are in a noble stage. And all these 5 different paths and 10 different stages can be practiced into the practice of 8-fold Arya marg, 8-fold noble path, which is a famous teaching, because this eightfold qualities of path is explicitly mentioned in the first Dhammacakkappavattana, on which text we are dwelling all the 5 days. So these are the right view, right thought. Right thought is a not very good translation, but everybody use this. It's not an usual thought. It is a kind of mindset which has a quality of determination. Actually, the Sanskrit word is sankalp. Sankalp has a connotation to determination. So the thought can be understood in a very ordinary way. Not kalp, it is sankalp. So in Sanskrit, sankalp and vikalp, there's little difference. So right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditative stabilization. This is a very long word. This gives a very good insight and a very good advice to even ordinary lifestyle. If you have even a secular person, you have these things, it will give you immense help to lead a very positive life. You must have a right view, vision. Without having a view or vision for your life, even ordinary, modern, secular life may become confused, and you may get into what you call these days, many people talk about this, tension, anxiety, and then what's the big thing? Depression. So many people says someone is went in a depression. There are so many depressions, economic depression and mind depression. So these are all due to not having a right view and right determination. And right speech refers to the discipline of one's speech, and right action, of course, one's action. A right livelihood is almost impossible in the globalized society. All livelihood is contaminated directly or indirectly or structural violence. So someone is willing to lead a spiritual life, then right livelihood is immensely important, and how to get it, that is the $1,000 question. So this eightfold noble path are part of the threefold education. The right view is in the nature of the insight, the prajna, the wisdom, the third one. And the right thought, the samek sankalp, belongs to all the three. A part can be in the wisdom, a part can be in the conduct, a part can be in the meditative mind. Then right speech, right action, right livelihood is a part of moral conduct, the Shila. And the right effort belongs to all the three. And the right mindfulness and the right meditative stabilization belongs to the third one, the samadhi. So by this way, someone really practices eightfold noble path, to accumulate the three higher education as taught by Buddha. A pure moral conduct, that means a moral conduct which is completely free from direct violence and possibility of violence. That's called Adi Shil. There are so many different kind of Shil. The Shil of nuns, or Shil of bhikkhus, or Shil of household people, or Shil of Bodhisattvas, or Shil of the Vajrayanas. There are different Shils. But the entirety of the Shil can be combined into the Pratimukh Shil and the Bodhisattva Shil. Bodhisattva Shil includes the Vajrayana Shil as well. So Pratimukh Shil is refrain from physical and vocal violence. Your physical and vocal action shall have to be free from direct violence and the possibility of violence. So that forms the Pratimukh Shil, the Shil of monks and nuns. And the Bodhisattva Shil includes refrain from direct violence and the possibility of violence of the metal. The Pratimukh Shil do not deal with the metal activity. Bodhisattva Shil deals with the metal activity. Shenyu Shidan Chebale Doba, to refrain from violence and its possibility vocally and physically, that constitutes the Sosutharve Sulching, the Pratimukh Shil, and to refrain from all kind of violence and possibility of violence in the mindset, that constitutes the Shil of Bodhisattvas. So, such Shil is the basis for cultivation of concentrative mind. Without a base of Shil, you cannot hope for arising of a good samadhi, a good meditative stabilization. Meditative stabilization or a meditative mind is the discipline of mind. And the discipline of mind cannot be achieved unless and until you have a physical and a vocal discipline. Again, we have to understand that discipline does not mean some kind of control by oneself or by someone else. It shall have to be discipline in a natural way. You need not make efforts to control yourself. You shall have to cultivate yourself that you are at ease in these do's and don'ts, not suppressing, not putting down the negative mind or negative actions. You have to cultivate yourself. Naturally, you do not indulge into negative things, and naturally you do not miss something positive things. So that is the why the word higher or the special. So by that way, then your mind can be evolved into a concentrative stabilization, and after getting concentrative stabilization, then the awakening of insight is almost automatic. Once you stabilize your mind, then you have natural urge to meditate and search the truth, and then you will awake. If you awake in intelligence, then you will flower in goodness. That is a phrase repeatedly used by my late friend Jiddu Krishnamurti. He always says, awakening of inner intelligence lead you to flowering in goodness. So flowering in goodness is considered to be effortless. To be awakening the inner intelligence needs a lot of effort. So you have to practice the shil and the samadhi, and then you will achieve the wisdom. And once you achieve the wisdom, then of course you will go ahead, and then you can achieve the Buddha nature, and you can serve the entire sentient beings. I think this is the sequence how the Buddha have taught to all his disciples. So that means the fourth noble truth, the truth of cessation, the Nirodha Satya, that is a kind of logical conclusion after realizing the truth of misery and realizing the cause of the truth of misery, and thereby practicing the truth of path and remain in the truth of path. And in the truth of path, you are practicing the eightfold noble path and the shil, samadhi and pragyan. And if you are bodhisattva, then you practice in the 6 paramitas or 10 paramitas. So thereby you can systematically, in a very in a logical order, you can achieve the enlightenment. And enlightenment is the potential of every individual. It is at the hand of every individual, and it is not to be awarded or given by someone else from outside. Of course, if you are in something lower realm, then you have no capacity or no opportunity to achieve the possibilities of higher realm of spirituality. We all already having the fortune of as a human body, women and men, and a human intelligence, and this has the capacity to practice, to study, and to meditate. So it is now entirely our own hand. We are not depending on no one. If we have the will and we have the intention, we can achieve even the Buddha nature within our lifetime. The possibility and the teaching and the other conditions are very much there. So we cannot blame anybody else. So we have to be understand it's our own decision whether we make effort or do not make effort. this is indeed a very special place, the Lerabling. And a special place does not mean the concrete built of houses and planted trees. The special place means the facility of study and practicing, and the facility of teaching, and the facility of environment in which a practitioner can practice in accordance with the instructions of Dharma. So this is very rare, and I appreciate all the people who have created such special place for the benefit of numerous people. Of course, it is basically due to the vision, the instruction, and the guidance of Sujay Rinpoche, but it's also contributed by many, many dedicated workers. So I appreciate each one of them. So I visited this time for the second time Lerabling, and there have been a lot of changes and developments, improvement in the place and in the environment and in the other facilities. So the people who have the desire and will to enter into spirituality and practice something, they should use this place and this facility in an appropriate way. Sujay Rinpoche, in his successive reincarnations, has a great close relationship with the successive Dalai Lamas, and thereby for the entirety of the Buddha Dharma in Tibet. And his work and his teaching in these days in the western part of the world is also, I think, in a part of a larger master plan, and it has so many things to unroll in the future. In that, the people who are connected to this place or the Ripa Sangha or Ripa tradition should be aware of the larger responsibility, their larger responsibility to Buddha Dharma and to a particular Ripa tradition and particular teachings of the successive Triten Suljel and the new editions of the present Sujay Rinpoche. All this we shall have to aware of and recognize them and give value to them and to preserve and promote it for the benefit of entire sentient being. The Ripa members of Ripa Sangha are doing so many different good projects and good works. I think these need to be successful. The Tenzin Gyatso Institute and helping the students monk students to introduce to the modern science. The dialogue between Buddha Dharma and modern science, initiated by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and also contributed by many spiritual teachers in the West, is, I think, one of the unique openings. Because science, there are a lot of good things, there are a lot of bad things. And the science has given to the people and environment of this small planet Earth lot of damage and a lot of harm, although the science has great potential of good things. So now what need is to reorient the entire scientific effort only to constructive way and to heal the planet Earth and to heal the minds of people. And for that, only encounter with Dharma is the way, the only way to reorient the scientists, to reorient the science effort, and to take out the good things from science and to avoid the destructive things of the science. And for that, the dialogue between science and Dharma has, I think, a very important role to play, because the majority of human mind in these days are influenced by so-called modernity, modern knowledge, and modern science. And therefore, to encounter this, we need something, a very effective instrument which can go with the scientific inquiry, otherwise we were not able to reorient science. I appreciate each one of you for your attention and coping with me in spite of all limitations and shortcomings. You put up and tolerated me all the day through, and I wish you all the best way. And again, my salutations to Samdhong Rinpoche and his dedicated workers and the Lerabling as whole. Thank you very much.